with dire lack of showers. The earth was brown, was lacking plants and flowers. We needed renewed faith as a sustainer, and so we made a visit to Transylvania, the country where Unitarianism was born and which subjected our beliefs to scorn. A visit to reclaim our early roots, a pilgrimage for Unitarian truths. 18 of us, all genders and all ages, to view the birthplace of our founding sages. Socinus and Servetus and Francis David, and others that proclaimed that all were saved, that God was one, not spirit, cleft in three, and stressed Jesus' sole humanity. Thus subject to official Christian scorn, proclaims that Jesus was sole human born, not to be worshipped as a God divine. One died in prison in 1579. Dissenters later called this treatment beastly, and so did scientists like Joseph Priestley. To celebrate our heritage took us far, to St. Michael's Church in Kolosvar, and many sites in which our faith now stands, free from any interfering hands, to Torda, where acts of tolerance were signed, and Diva, where Francis David was confined, and other cities not in our vernacular, including Sigismara, home of Dracula. Welcomed by members of our partner church with sermon and warm greetings for our search, our partner church, Erdo St. Georgi, wined and dined us in a dancing orgy. Some boarded with our Unitarian hosts, and many seemed to like this part the most. After 2 weeks of pilgrimage, we flew home. Let's celebrate this journey in a poem.
Hi, I'm Aki Rasmussen. So I asked myself, what was this trip about? And for me, it was about connection. Early in the trip, we were in Kolosvar, Transylvania, where we visited the First Unitarian Church and their Unitarian headquarters. We sat one morning in the headquarters conference room, which was lined with portraits of Unitarian leaders from the last 450 years. Up until that moment, I had been appreciating the churches, schools, plazas, and sites of Kolosvar. But as I looked at the portraits of the people that served in the Unitarian churches in Transylvania or contributed in other ways, people who withstood innumerable changes in the society around them, many of which threatened the existence of the church, I felt a connection to these people I had never even heard of before that day. A connection to our shared values of independence and freedom of thought. I'm of Japanese ancestry and appreciate the ties to my culture, but the connection I felt that day to the importance of the struggles for freedom of thought was powerful, and it was totally unexpected. I felt that these were my people. And that feeling continued throughout the trip. There were other wonderful moments of connection during the trip, sharing with our fellow travelers a solemn service in the prison cell where Francis David was martyred, joining a folk ensemble in some lively Transylvanian folk dances, excitedly getting off the bus to the welcome of our host families in Erdo St. George, the visit of our partner church, the village of our partner church, listening to the stories of our host families. MDUUC travelers bravely singing in Hungarian the hymn that we just sang earlier, which was well practiced, but maybe not so understandable to our hosts. We sang that hymn for the Sunday Thanksgiving service of our partner church. I'm so grateful to have had a chance to make these wonderful connections and hope to find ways to keep them alive.
Hi, I'm Marjorie Wallace. It was a foggy and drizzly September Monday in Deva, the small Transylvanian town where David Ferenc, or Francis David, the inventor of Unitarianism, died in prison, they think on November 15th, 1579. The previous evening in the lobby, we had practiced the Seke blessing, and Aki brought this for me. I bought this. It's hand embroidered, and it has the same blessing. And then we went to dinner, and I had seen some stray dogs, and so after dinner with my co-conspirator, the youngest member of the pilgrimage, Wyatt, we headed to where we thought they would go, and we put all the leftover chicken from our dinner under the trees, and we saw some stray dogs heading that way, so we felt very happy about that. And then I went upstairs, and they had this fantastic Las Vegas-style light show going on, and I could see it from my window, kind of incongruous with where we were now the next day at the top of this foggy, drizzly mountain in the Citadel in a small enclosure where there was a column commemorating the death of David Ferenc, our founder. Okay. The young minister from Deva spoke about David Ferenc and how his death is commemorated each November 15th and the debt we owe to him. I remembered when this young minister had come several years before to the Walnut Creek Church and preached when he was a Bollock scholar. And here he was, thousands of miles away, speaking about our founder. And here I was, even more amazingly, listening to him. Then Maria Pop, our take charge tour guide, who was one of the very first Transylvanian Unitarian ministers, and now was an executive with the Transylvanian Unitarian Church, spoke. And we had heard her speak before. She talked about how easy it was in the States for us to take freedom of religion for granted, but how in Transylvania the Unitarians could never take it for granted. And I thought about how ironic that was, since it was the Transylvanians who had the first edict of religious tolerance in 1568. And she talked about the importance of connection and how important it was for the survival of the Transylvanian Unitarian Church. She talked about how the church survived because it was willing to compromise and join together with other progressive Reformed churches because they all recognized that they had to band together in order to survive, and they had strength in numbers. And I thought about our dysfunctional U.S. Congress, which has taken Maria's treasured word, compromise, and turned it into a dirty word. Being in this place on this foggy and drizzly day with my fellow MDUUC pilgrims, I felt so connected to the place, to the Transylvanian Unitarians, to the young Deva minister, and to Maria. The sense of connection was omnipresent. I remembered how over the years in Walnut Creek, our ministers Leslie and our former minister David had so often spoke about the importance of connection. The connection I felt now ran deep. It spanned the centuries since David Ferenc invented our faith. I felt it in my bones and in my heart. I felt it even though I knew intellectually that if I lived in Romania, I would not be a Unitarian. And that is because in Romania, Unitarianism is inextricably linked to being ethnically Hungarian, and I am ethnically Romanian. But it didn't matter. On this day, I felt connected to all the Transylvanian Unitarians, the ones in the Citadel, and later the ones when I met my host family, the ones long gone through the centuries, and to David Ferenc. I felt overwhelmingly grateful and humble.
We're Judy and Hal Young, and we're on this trip. I thought about doing this trip from a GA poster. This is what the Partner Church Council's theme is. The most radical thing we can do is to introduce people to one another. And for me, that's what this trip was. We were introduced to our host family when we got off the bus. There was the mother and the 13-year-old daughter, and we walked quite a distance to their home. And the first thing we found out, they had Wi-Fi, so I got out my Google Translate, which I strongly recommend, on my iPhone, and you can say something and it translates to Hungarian. They can read it, and vice versa. Except, as you all know, if you've done any translations, there's some mistakes. So the first thing we had to apologize, like, oh, didn't mean to say that, or, you know. We laughed together at our mistakes, and then the grandparents came, and they apologized for having no English. What? Because the 13-year-old just studied 1 year. I wrote on the translator, we'll connect with our eyes and with our hearts. They knew that, and we did for the next few days. Now, the first thing they did, this was in the afternoon, was they started pouring us strong cherry brandy in the mid-afternoon. It's part of their culture. It enhances the conversation. And also after church, on Sunday, we went back to the grandparents' home to show us, and the first thing they did was open up a bottle of wine and start refilling. Now, that maybe they have little cups, but you get like 8 fillings before you have it. They wanted to show us their vegetable plot, or we'd ask, and so we walked a couple blocks to where they had a vegetable garden, and we recognized that all of our meals were made from the fruits and vegetables from that place, and they had 4 huge pigs and a chicken coop. And David Stanley's daughter, Andrea, was traveling with us from Missoula, Montana, and she's the one that really said it's the idyllic lifestyle. You're living organically off your own land. And when we asked the man what his expenses were, he didn't buy any food. It was all because they made their own wine. We saw their kegs of wine and their cherry brandy too from their cherry tree. But they pay for Wi-Fi, and they pay for electricity and energy and their housing. Now, during this time, we had a young man who was a recent graduate in a high-tech company, about 23, who came and had meals with us and served as our translator. And we, therefore, could go into a much deeper level of conversation. And we got to talk about lifestyles under communism, where the family had to give 10% of their crops, of their food, to the communists. We talked about the average monthly salary of the man is $250 a month, and his wife, who worked 40 hours a week in a store, made $100 a month. 90% of the people in Romania have somebody in the West sending them money. You need that to break even. We did wine tasting one of the nights, and in folk dancing, I connected with Grandpa quite well. We danced, of course, maybe it was after the wine, but we had a great connection of dancing. I learned a lot of new steps. And on the last day, the mother of the family was a little more quiet, or maybe busy cooking and serving. But when with our translator at dinner, I said, I asked, well, what did you learn? How was this for you? And she said with tears in her eyes, really, she said, I thought Americans were really different. But, we're really, really all the same. So now we're Facebook friends and we iMessage. That connection will maintain. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Howard.
And I'm Deborah.
And this is Deborah. If I ever wondered that you could communicate without knowing the other's language, that disappeared. I'm watching Deborah and our host family's 4-year-old engage in a lively, wonderful relationship. Some of our conversation we shared the same host family, regarded the need to see where youth felt connected with the church. And that seemed to apply equally on both sides of the Atlantic. It was enriching and inspiring. This poem came partly out of that. It's called Sanctuary, a Shared Place Between. It's also a hymn. I'll start it, and Deborah will complete it. Let us build a sanctuary and use our caring for cement, our light hearts for its masonry, and for the arches, commitment. The opening sky its wide roof shall be, and empathy its entranceway. Courage beckons to us from its door. Acceptance forms its deepest floor.
When we choose to risk with caring, life speaks through us to all as hope.